peeps, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or if this is your first time here, then just welcome. Before we get into today's case, I just want to give another disclaimer that everything I'm going to talk about in this video is just things that I got off internet sites. It's available to everyone in the public, so I just put it all together in one video for your information purposes. I also just want to give a quick trigger warning. It is another true crime case, so obviously there are going to be themes of murder, some graphic details of the murder, and also maybe some graphic photos, but I will give a warning before the photos are going to come up on the screen. But obviously, as I said last time, if you are a true crime fan and you're watching true crime videos, you should probably be expecting this type of content to appear in the video. Alrighty, so today we are talking about a case that was probably one of the most highly publicized and high-profile murder cases in South Africa. Many people have made comparisons between this case and the O.J. Simpson case in America, just because O.J. Simpson is also a famous sports hero, or was a famous sports hero, who was accused of murdering his ex-wife Nicole Brown. Obviously, we all know in O.J.'s case he was acquitted of the murder, but there are still some similarities, obviously because they're both rich and famous sports people. So today we are talking about Oscar Pistorius and Reeva Steenkamp. Looking at them, they looked like the perfect power couple. He was a Paralympic gold star medalist. He had taken part in the Olympics. He had a whole ton of trophies and awards behind his name for sports, and he was a hero in our country because of who he was. And then obviously Reeva was this beautiful model, like completely stunning, and also very intelligent because she had studied law at university. So they were just like the absolute power couple, kind of like the Posh and Becks of South Africa, if you will. So everything was going really well in their relationship, well, that's what it looked like, until Valentine's Day in 2013, when everything changed forever. So Reeva Rebecca Steenkamp was born on the 19th of August 1983 to her dad, who was a horse trainer, Barry Steenkamp, and her mom June, who was from the UK, and therefore Reeva also just had dual citizenship between the UK and South Africa. So she attended school at St. Dominic's Priory School in Port Elizabeth, and she had two older half-siblings from her parents' previous marriages, her brother Andre Steenkamp and her sister Simone Calburn. She studied law at the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, where she got her degree in 2005. Her modeling career started when she was about 15, and she decided to enter a local Port Elizabeth newspaper's beauty competition that they had. She was basically discovered by their then beauty editor, Barbara Robertson, who just saw something special in Reeva. Reeva later ended up being a model that featured on the cover of an FHM magazine. She was also listed as one of their top 100 sexiest women in the world for 2 years in a row. And she also was on a reality show called Tropica Island of Treasure. So it seems like she was trying to kind of get into acting. She seemed like she had a very promising career ahead of her. She had obviously decided to study law in case her modeling career hadn't taken off, but obviously that was very successful. So she basically was just great at everything that she did, and everyone who knew her just said she was such a beautiful soul, not just on the outside but on the inside too, just like such a beautiful person. Oscar and Reeva met when they were out for lunch with a mutual friend, Justin Tavares, on the 4th of November 2012. After the lunch had ended, Oscar said to Justin that he actually had no date to take with him to the South African Sports Awards that were happening that evening, and Justin suggested to Oscar, why not ask Reeva? So he decided to message her and try, and surprisingly, she said yes, she would come with him. So they had an amazing date that night, a great night out. They met up for coffee again the next day, and basically for the rest of that week they saw each other every single day, spending time getting to know each other. So who was Reeva's new love interest? Mr. Oscar Pistorius. So Oscar Leonard Cole Pistorius was born on the 22nd of November 1986 to his dad, who is known as Henk Pistorius and is part of the family, the very wealthy family, who own a company called H. Pistorius and Co. And Oscar's mom was Sheila Bakker. She and her husband divorced when Oscar was about 6 years old. He has two siblings, an older brother named Carl and a younger sister named Amy. And unfortunately, their mom Sheila passed away suddenly from a disease when Oscar was about 15 years old. It is said that Sheila is the one who always used to encourage Oscar and push him to be the greatest person that he could be, which obviously every parent or most parents want their children to be successful. But in Oscar's case, it was a little bit different because he was born with a congenital defect. The defect that he was born with is called fibula hemimelia, and it means it's the absence of the fibula, and this was in both his legs. So just before his first birthday, both of his legs had to be amputated between the knees and the ankles. And luckily for Oscar, he was born into a super wealthy family, so they could afford to give him the best medical care and the best prosthetics that money could buy. He was always kind of sporty in school and, interested in that kind of thing, but he endured an injury while playing rugby and hurt his knees, and that's when he started doing track, sort of as a form of rehabilitation. This was in 2003. In 2004, he won gold in the 200-meter race at the Athens Paralympics, and in the 2008 Beijing Paralympics, he won 3 gold medals. And then in 2012, at London's Olympic Games, he became the first amputee to participate in the able-bodied Olympics. And he wasn't even just an amputee, he was a double amputee. So this brings us to our timeline where we were now in 2012. So 3 months after participating in the London Olympics, he met Reeva in November, and this is when they obviously started dating. During the court trial, they went through basically all of the text messages between the couple. There were hundreds, and most of them were very loving and sweet messages, the type that you would expect from a newly blossoming relationship. But some of those messages actually got really dark. In one message that Reeva sent to him on the 27th of January 2013, she said that you have picked on me incessantly since you got back from Cape Town, and I understand that you're sick, but it's nasty. And then further down in that message, she basically told him that he scares her sometimes when he snaps at her, and she's scared about the way that he will react to her. So this message came after they had attended their mutual friend Darren Fresco's engagement party that day, and it seems like Oscar had accused her of flirting with one of the other men that were there and made a bit of a scene, and he embarrassed her in front of all of their friends, so they ended up leaving the engagement party earlier than what Reeva obviously had wanted to do. So this is just kind of telling of the kind of behavior that was being presented in their relationship between Oscar and Reeva. On the 13th of February 2013, Reeva shared 2 tweets on her Twitter account. The first one was at about 10:30 in the morning, and I quote, it said, "It's a beautiful day, make things happen. I'm starting my day off with a yummy healthy shake from my boo," ending with a little smiley face. And then the second tweet was at about 1:30 in the afternoon, where she said, "What do you have up your sleeve for your Valentine tomorrow? Hashtag get excited. Hashtag Valentine's Day." So in retrospect, these tweets just are really sad because she seemed so happy and so in love and excited to be spending time at her boyfriend's house, staying over by him and getting to spend their first Valentine's Day together. Little did she know that this would also be their last. On Thursday morning, the 14th of February 2013, the whole of South Africa woke up to the shocking news that our Olympian hero had murdered his model girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp, and as quickly as they had begun, the power couple were over. Updates quickly started coming out as media was obviously camping outside the Silverwoods estate where Oscar lived in Pretoria. trying to give updates about what was happening, and with the police going in and out and the investigations during the day. So Oscar was formally charged with murder the following day on the 15th of February, and his bail hearing commenced on the 19th of February, which continued for about 4 days, after which the Chief Magistrate of South Africa, Desmond Nair, released Oscar on bail of 1 million rand. His murder trial started on the 3rd of March 2014 at the Pretoria High Court, with Judge Thokozile Masipa presiding over the case. So obviously he was facing one charge of murder, obviously for Reeva, but he was also facing one charge of illegal possession of ammunition, which he had found in his house. He tried to blame his dad and say he was keeping the ammunition there for him, but his dad denied this. And he was also facing 2 charges of firing a gun in a public space. So these were all the charges he was facing at that time. This is when Oscar's reputation as a hero and an inspiration to everyone started changing drastically to someone who was very controlling and arrogant and had a way of manipulating people. He always wanted to get his own way. It seems that he had an aggressive and a dark side, and as witness after witness started taking the stand during the trial, all of these stories started emerging of who the real Oscar Pistorius was. So one such story was on the 12th of September 2009, when Oscar was having a get-together at his house for some of his friends. So apparently him and his then girlfriend Melissa Rom started getting into like a massive argument, and then he was using vulgar language and verbally attacking Melissa and her friends. At some stage, it escalated to the point where Oscar punched a door so hard in his fit of rage that it actually injured one of Melissa's friends, Cassidy Taylor Memory, and cut her leg open. So as a result, she opened a case of assault against Oscar, and this started a 4-year-long legal battle between the two of them. It was eventually settled out of court in December 2013, which is 10 months after Reeva's death. Another story was told in court by Oscar's one ex-girlfriend, Samantha Taylor, and also one of his closest friends, Darren Fresco. Both of them testified separately about events that had happened on the 30th of September 2012 when they were driving through the Witwatersrand area. So basically what happened was they were driving at night, and police had pulled them over for speeding. So Oscar and Darren were told to get out of the vehicle. One of the police officers noticed Oscar's gun lying on the car seat and informed him that you cannot have a loaded weapon out in public like that. It's obviously not safe, and wanted Oscar to empty the magazine, by taking all the bullets out of the gun. And Oscar got angry and lost his temper at the police and told him not to touch his weapon, after which they got back in the car and sped off. Oscar then said that he felt like shooting at a traffic light, and then shot and fired a bullet out of the open sunroof of the car. I mean, this is with 2 passengers sitting centimeters away from where he had just shot a bullet in his car. So that was the one charge that he was facing for firing a gun in public. And then the other one was also a story told by his friend Darren Fresco. So this incident happened on the 11th of January 2013. It was at a restaurant called Tasha's at Melrose Arch in Johannesburg. So basically Oscar was out with some of his friends. It was Oscar, it was Darren Fresco, and then there were 2 other people, Kevin Arena, who is a professional South African boxer, and Martin Rooney, who is a British sprinter. So the 4 of them were out for lunch, and at some point during lunch, Darren passed his gun to Oscar under the table. It's unclear why he did this, but in any case, he told Oscar that there was 1 bullet in the chamber, and as soon as Oscar took the weapon from him, it went off, and he had shot a hole into the restaurant's floor. So Oscar quickly started begging Darren to please take the blame for this, because he said that there was too much media coverage on him already. And so when the restaurant owners, Justin and Maria, came to the table to find out what was going on, I mean, this was lunchtime. It was a packed restaurant full of lunchgoers, including families with children, and Darren told them that it was his gun and it had fallen out of his tracksuit pants and got hooked on the pants or something and had accidentally gone off. So apparently the owner of the restaurant's wife, Maria, smacked Darren on the head when he told her that. So, but it did now obviously later come out that it was Oscar who had fired the shot, and therefore he was also being charged for firing a gun in public for that incident. There was also testimony given by his ex-girlfriend Samantha Taylor, where she testified about months of abuse that she had endured while dating Oscar. She told about physically like bruises that she had gotten from arguments and things like that. And also there were times when he apparently locked her alone in his house without any food. He would tell her that he was just going out for a few hours with friends and then would literally not come back until the next day, and she would be stuck inside there. When they weren't together, he was very controlling. He would constantly phone her and text her, ask her where she is, who she's with, what she's doing, that type of thing. Her mom Trish also testified, or she said in interviews at least, that this is true. Oscar was very controlling. He would even phone Samantha's mom Trish and ask her where Samantha is and what she's doing if he couldn't get hold of Samantha. So she said that there was even times during arguments where she would hide Oscar's gun out of fear of what he could possibly do in his fit of rage. And she said that what happened to Reeva could very easily have happened to her, which is incredibly sad. So what happened on that fateful night, or / early hours of the morning of the 14th of February 2013? So similarly to the case in the video that I did previously of the Van Breda family murders, there are two very different sides and versions to the story. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll just add a link to it at the bottom in the description and you can check it out later. Anyway, so obviously there was Oscar's side of the story and the prosecution side of the story. So according to Oscar, what happened was they were having a normal chilled evening at home. They had had dinner, all of that, and by about 10 o'clock at night they decided to go upstairs to his room, and Reeva did yoga exercises, which she often did before bed. So she was busy doing her yoga exercises and he was lying in bed with his prosthetics off, watching TV. When she was done with her exercise, she got into bed. They eventually fell asleep, all good. Then something woke him up in the early hours of the morning, and Reeva was also awake, and she turned to him and said, "Baba, can't you sleep?" And then he replied, "Yes," like, no, you can't sleep. So then he decided to get up. And so basically his bedroom is on the top floor and it's got a balcony just outside the sliding doors. So he went out onto the balcony and there was a fan there, and he brought the fan in and then closed the sliding doors, closed the blinds and the curtains. And while he was doing all of this, he heard a noise in the bathroom. So he's got an ensuite bathroom onto his bedroom, but so it's his bedroom, and then there's a little passageway with like cupboards along, and then at the end of the passage, that's where the ensuite bathroom is. So the bathroom itself doesn't have a door, you just walk into it. But inside the bathroom, there's the bath and the shower and all of that. There's a toilet with that's in its own cubicle with its own separate door. So that's basically the layout. So he heard a noise coming from the bathroom. So it's now pitch black, like dark, and he decided to, on his stumps in the dark, grab this 9mm weapon that he kept under his bed. So he always kept a gun under his bed because he says he got death threats often because he's a public figure, and also because of the high crime rate in South Africa. He was always scared of intruders breaking in. So he grabbed the 9mm and then started like making his way down the passage towards the bathroom. While going down the passage, he started yelling at the intruder or intruders to get out of his house and leave, and that he was on the way there, I guess, with the weapon or whatever. And at the same time, he also started calling back to Reeva, who he thought was lying in the bed because it was dark and he hadn't seen her. He started calling out to her to phone the police. So he got to the bathroom and he saw that his bathroom window was open and the door of the toilet cubicle was closed, and you could hear noise coming from inside there. So obviously he thought that the intruder or someone was inside that cubicle. He then he says he felt very vulnerable because he was on his stumps, so it gives him problems with his mobility. And then also he was just terrified that the intruder or intruders were going to come out of the toilet cubicle and attack him and Reeva. So he had to fight to protect them. and just started firing shots at the toilet door. After he did this, he backed away, like went backwards, watching the toilet door to make sure the intruders were not coming out, and went back down the passage again, yelling at Reeva to phone the police. But he wasn't getting an answer from her, so he, when he reached the bed, he like felt to talk to her or whatever, and realized Reeva's not in the bed. He says this is the first time that it dawned on him that it could have been Reeva that was in the toilet. So he went back to the toilet again, still on his stumps, and tried to open the toilet cubicle door, but it was locked. So he went back to his room, switched on all the lights now, opened the balcony and yelled out of the balcony for someone to come help him, one of his neighbors to please come and help him. Went back into his room, put his prosthetics on at this point, and then went back to the bathroom, tried to kick the cubicle door open with his prosthetic foot, legs, and this didn't work. He was unsuccessful. So he ran back to the room, and he had a cricket bat lying in his room. Went back to the bathroom with the cricket bat, and then tried to start smashing the toilet cubicle door open. So once he had gotten like a chunk out of it, he could see the key of the toilet cubicle door lying inside the on the floor. So he reached in through the hole in the door, picked the key up, and then unlocked the door. And that's when he opened the door and saw Reeva lying slumped over the toilet with blood everywhere. So he said at this point Reeva was still alive, so he phoned someone named Johan Stander who worked at the estate or for the estate, and asked him to phone emergency services. And then he himself, Oscar, phoned Netcare and asked them to send an ambulance. Apparently someone told him that it would be quicker if he just took Reeva in his own car, which is what he decided to do then. So he went downstairs to unlock the door for if that other man, Johan, or his neighbors or someone who's coming to help came in. Went back up and then picked Reeva up, and it was as he was carrying her down the stairs that his neighbors got there and saw this whole scene, and he put her down at the bottom of the staircase, and apparently he was crying and freaking out, and he said to the neighbors, I shot Reeva, I thought she was an intruder. And then he says that Reeva apparently died in his arms. So that's Oscar's event of the story. It is worth noting, I do want to add here that there was a ballistics expert, Thomas Wolmerans, and he obviously did tests on the bullet trajectories in the door and also marks and things like that from the cricket bat, like the angles and positions and all of that. And he says, according to the evidence, Oscar's story that he says he was still on his stumps at the time of the shooting is true. The evidence does confirm that, and the prosecutors also then agreed with it, that this is what the evidence is proving, that Oscar was on his stumps, because the prosecution first wanted to argue that if he was not on his stumps and he had put his prosthetic legs on, if he had time to put the prosthetics on, he would have had time to check if Reeva was in the bed. So this kind of helped the defense then, saying that he was in such a hurried state and panicking and freaking out, thinking intruders were here, that he was doing all of this on his stumps. Anyway, it's just worth noting. So the prosecution was saying that their side of the story, like what they think happened, is that Oscar and Reeva had a massive argument that night, and that after this argument, well, knowing about how aggressive he can be and his short temper and all of that, and if you look back at her message, refer to the message that she sent him that I spoke about earlier on the 27th of January, where she said, you know, that she gets scared of him because of how he snaps at her. The prosecution said it's more likely that what happened is she grabbed her cell phone and ran down the passage to the bathroom and locked herself in the toilet cubicle to get away from him, and then to be able to call someone to come and help her. And that's probably when he followed her there and maybe warned her, saying if she doesn't open this door now, he's going to shoot it open or something like that. And obviously she didn't open the door, so he started shooting. So and then obviously when he realized what he had done, that's when he started crying, more because he knew he was in trouble and had to come up with a quick story about the intruders, instead of being upset about the fact that Reeva was now dead. So there's also a detective, Pete Bielefeld, and in an interview that he did, he said he just mentioned the fact that it's odd that Reeva would be going to a toilet at, you know, the early hours of the morning with her cell phone and then lock the toilet cubicle door. Like, What reason would you have to do that? Usually if someone gets up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet, you get up, you go to the toilet, come back to bed. There's no reason why you wouldn't be needing to take your cell phone and lock the toilet cubicle and do all of that, unless she felt like she was in danger of something and trying to get away from someone and needed to hide and phone for help. So that kind of then obviously lends towards the prosecutor's story rather than Oscar's version of the events. So during the trial, Oscar didn't want to look at any of the photos of the crime scene, even or especially the photos of Reeva's wounds from the gunshot injuries. Sorry, these are the photos that her parents, June and Barry, asked the media to make public so everyone could see what he had done to their daughter, because obviously Oscar is a very famous sports hero icon type of thing, and they wanted people to know the monster that he really is, that type of thing. So these photos were released publicly, and he also started vomiting at one stage when the pathologists were describing Reeva's gunshot wounds and injuries and things in court. So I don't know, he had very severe emotional reactions to the events that were happening in court. Her parents also waived their right to have a civil lawsuit against him. They just decided it was something that they didn't want to pursue. However, some reports do state that Oscar apparently were paying Reeva's parents some kind of stipend of about 8,000 Rand a month for a while after the murders. This was because they were financially dependent on Reeva from her income. So I'm not sure if that was more like because he felt guilty or bad for what he had done, or just to help out. I don't know what his reasoning was, but apparently that is something that he did do. Another just interesting thing, it's not really relevant towards the actual case, but it's just something that I always find fascinating, is that just after originally his first bail hearing, when he was let off on 1 million Rand, while they were doing the investigation before the trial started, he went to Mozambique on holiday to Inhambane, and he met a girl named Lee Sky Milan. So she grew up in Potchefstroom, and she was at that time studying to be a paramedic at the University of Johannesburg. So she had also been on holiday in Inhambane, Mozambique, and that's where they met and started dating. So she was basically supporting him through parts of the trial. It does seem like their relationship wasn't very long, and it fizzled out pretty quickly, which I think is lucky for Lee. That's just my opinion. But anyway, it always just fascinates me how after someone has been accused of murdering someone else, how there are still people out there who want to date them and support them. It's just, I guess, to each their own. Anyway, that's just an interesting thing that I thought I wanted to add in here. So after all the witnesses had given their testimony, and then also with all the drama between the two lawyers, it was actually at some stage called the Barry versus Harry war that was going on for the defense and the prosecution, and then also all Oscar-winning performances in court with his crying and excessive emotional outbursts that he was constantly having.
I flung the door open, I threw it open, and I sat over Reeva and I cried. And I don't know how long I don't know how long I was there for. She wasn't breathing.
I think we'll take an adjournment. What will adjourn?
Now, the crazy part. Like, you would think the murder and the trial and all of that was the craziest, but no. The wild roller coaster ride started with his sentencing and conviction, because I don't even think there's another case where it was so ridiculous and up and down. So basically what happened was, on the 21st of October 2014, Oscar was officially charged with culpable homicide. So this is about the equivalent of manslaughter overseas, I think. Their reasoning for this was because Reeva's murder may not have been intentional, but it was still unlawful. And for this culpable homicide conviction, he received a 5-year sentence, but they did say he would be eligible for parole after 10 months, and that is exactly what happened. So on the 21st of August 2015, he was supposed to be released on parole, and it didn't happen at that point though, but the plan was that he would be put under house arrest to go and stay under the supervision of his uncle Arnold in his giant luxury mansion in Pretoria. Like, what a terrible sentence. But anyway, he was officially released on the 19th of October 2015, and by then the prosecutors had started an appeal against his conviction and against his sentencing. So they said that basically their argument was it was irrelevant who was in the toilet cubicle at the time when he was shooting. It doesn't matter if it was Reeva or if it was these intruders that he said were in there. Still, he pointed and shot 4 bullets into a door of a tiny little confined space. So he must have known that whoever was inside there, he was going to murder them, doing that his actions were going to kill someone. So because of that, they said that it should be changed from culpable homicide to murder, and that's exactly what happened. So on the 3rd of December, the South African Supreme Court of Appeals overrode the conviction of culpable homicide and changed it to murder. And then on the 6th of July 2016, the judge who had resided over his original case, Judge Thokozile Mapisa, she sentenced him, so she changed his sentence from 5 years to 6 years for murder. I mean, honestly, really, I don't want to be sued by a judge, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like everybody feels the same that I do about this, the same as the prosecutors clearly felt, because they argued vehemently against this sentencing. 6 years for murder. The minimum sentence in South Africa for murder is 15 years, which I still think is pretty ridiculous, but that's still better than 6 years. So anyway, when he got this conviction and sentencing, he was originally in Kgosi Mampuru prison, which is not a really great prison. He was in the hospital side of it because of his disability, but still, apparently it's not a really good prison. There's lots of pictures and videos and things about the state of that place, and he himself was like, oh, it's so terrible, whatever. He doesn't want to go back there after he had obviously now been staying under house arrest at his uncle's house. So this time he was taken to Atteridgeville prison, which is a much more relaxed prison. It's actually for like lower grade criminals. The people that go there, their longest sentences are like 5-6 years. So basically he was the only prisoner there who was charged with murder. But anyway, so after this, the prosecutor then obviously appealed again. They appealed the sentence of 6 years, and the South African Supreme Court of Appeal in November 2017, they upped the sentence from 6 years to 15 years, and obviously they had to deduct the amount that he had already served in prison. So after that, he still had 13 years and 5 months left to serve, but obviously he's rich and famous. It's wonderful. So instead of going back to that Kgosi Mampuru prison where he actually should be, which is for murderers and rapists and that type of thing, they said it's okay, you can stay in the Atteridgeville, low-level prison, because he's so well behaved and he's not a risk to anybody. Probably also because he's rich and famous, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, so that's where he stayed, and he grows vegetables in a vegetable garden. He had a revamped bathroom made for him because of his disabilities. It's terrible. He's definitely learning his punishment there. Apparently started a Bible study group or something like that as well, which again they all do once they're in prison. So the problem is, for me, is that he's going to be eligible for parole in March 2023. So that's basically like 2.5 years from now, and probably he's going to be let out on good behavior. Money, fame, that's probably the reasons. But anyway, so that's what he would have done. That's the time he would have served for murdering his girlfriend. So I just want to know what your opinions are. Do you think that this was an accident? I mean, obviously we know Oscar did shoot Reeva. Like, that's not, he didn't argue that. Nobody can argue that. That's obviously what happened. But it's the reason that's the debate. So do you think the reason was because he thought there was really an intruder there? He didn't realize that Reeva had gotten out of the bed while he was outside bringing the fan back in and closing the balcony doors and all of those things, and went there genuinely thinking an intruder was in the house and he was protecting them from them by shooting so many times at the door? Or do you think there was an argument and their whirlwind romance of 3 months ended in a massive aggressive act of him shooting her to death? So in my opinion, he knew Reeva was in there, because it's just odd that she was there with her cell phone, that she had locked the door, that people had heard screaming before, and obviously his history of aggression and, you know, problems with guns, loving, you know, guns, so trigger happy kind of thing. And also the message that Reeva had sent like 2 weeks before the time, telling him that he scared her when he snapped. So, and his ex-girlfriend Samantha Taylor saying how she had hidden his gun during arguments before. So all of that just leads me to believe that that is probably what happened that night, and that he is guilty and did do this on purpose. And the only reason why he was crying and having that whole performance in court was because he was finally being held accountable for his actions for the first time in his life. So as always, please like this video. It just helps me out with the YouTube algorithms and all of that stuff. But other than that, until next time, bye. He was an Olympic gold star. He was a Paralympic. So Reeva Rebecca Steenkamp was born on the 19th. I'm back. Sorry about that. My dog was just barking and going crazy. And now there's aeroplanes flying over our house. It's going very well, yeah? And I just twisted my foot or something trying to get up. She studied law at the Nelson Mandela... She studied law at the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan